a surprise. A completely unexpected event. You get up in the morning, you come to work, and you think it's going to be just another ordinary day. Not boring, not ho-hum. You got plenty going on, but nothing unusual is expected to happen today. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, boom! How'd that happen? Why did that happen? How did it happen to you? You may not even know if you're dead or alive. And the boom can be anything. For me, it was an explosion. That's what you're going to hear about. But it can be the crashing of a car, a wreck. It can be an electrical shock. It can be losing your balance and losing your footing and falling and causing injury because you tripped and fell. The boom can be anything. But it never crosses our mind that it might happen to us. It'll always be somebody else. That's what I always thought. And the reason I tell my story is because I want people to know when that boom happens, what gets started. Because the truth is, us going to the hospital to get stitched up or get a cast put on a broken bone is nothing. Not compared to that ripple effect that you just started. Whatever just happened to you is going to happen to a lot of people. They are all going to deal with it, right? You know that. As soon as I said a ripple effect, you know what I'm talking about. How far-reaching is it going to go? Who all is going to be involved with what just happened to me? And the worst thing about that ripple effect, once you start it, you have no control. And that's the worst thing to have to learn to live with. I am Brad Livingston, live in Elkhart, Kansas, very southwest corner of the state. We're almost in Oklahoma, almost in Colorado, out there in the middle of the plains. We have the tumbleweeds blowing, like in the old Western. That's where I live. And been there my whole life, except for 4 years of being in the United States Air Force. I married my high school sweetheart, Bobby. We spent those 4 years in the military, moved back home to Elkhart. I went to work for a natural gas company, went to work in the pipeline department, really enjoyed that. It was outside, physical work. I liked it. Did it for 6 years. Then I accepted a job as a dispatcher. I'd been thinking, it's time to start moving up the corporate ladder. I accepted that position. The first couple of years of dispatching, I really enjoyed that. I learned a lot of new things. But then during my third year of dispatching, got to where I wasn't enjoying my job anymore. By the time I finished that year, I couldn't even stand to go into my office. Well, what had changed? My job hadn't changed any. What had changed was my perspective of my job. How I looked at it, what I focused on. I no longer thought about what my job was. I thought about what it's not. It's not outside. It's not physical. There's no variety to it. It's the same thing all day, every day, inside the same four walls. That was all I focused on. With that type of perspective, what happened to my attitude about my job? Went down in the barrel. So after 3.5 years, I wrote a letter to be transferred back to pipeline. Finally got that done. After 4 years of dispatching, I was going to work happy again. But that happiness was pretty short-lived, because just 2 months after I went back to pipeline was September 20th, 1991, which happened to be on a Friday. On Thursday, we found out there was some welding that needed done at a couple of our remote locations down in the Oklahoma Panhandle. The regular welder helper had just been temporarily assigned to help another group of guys who were short-handed. The next guy lined to fill in by seniority was called at noon on Thursday by his wife, saying she needed to go to the hospital and have their first child. I was third in line to be a welder helper Friday. I was glad to do it. I was liking my job again. I left Friday morning with a senior welder. We drove to the first location that has some welding that needed done. We finished that welding right at 10 o'clock. So we went in and was taking a break. Our company pupper came in and said he had a well just right outside the station yard from where we were. This well had 2 tanks on it. Both tanks had a pinhole leak in the weld that went around the fire tube. Could we put that on our schedule to fix sometime? If you don't know what a fire tube is, it's a piece of pipe that's welded onto a flange. The flange is bolted onto the side of the tank. The pipe sticks into the tank. You put fire in it, literally, to heat the contents of the tank so that they can separate better. Crude oil, drip gas. Drip gas is water that was down in the natural gas formation. When you pull the natural gas up, sometimes that water comes with it. It has taken on the characteristics of that natural gas, so it's just like gasoline. 2 tanks, 2 pinhole leaks. Could we put that on our schedule to fix sometime? The welder I was working with that day, his name's Tracy. At that point, Tracy had worked for the company for 30 years. He said, we'll just do it while we're here. The pumper said, okay, I'm going to call my supervisor and let him know what's going on. But because of a conflict between Tracy and that supervisor years earlier, and Tracy hadn't liked him ever since, he said, no, nobody's talking to your boss. I'm going to go do the job while I'm here, and we'll surprise him. Some more conversation ensued. We finished break time, drove over to the well. I got the gas detector out, checked the atmosphere around where we were going to be welding. Everything was fine. Asked Tracy, what's going to keep a spark from getting inside one of these tanks and setting them off? These tanks have been sitting on this well over 20 years with that drip gas. It's like gasoline. They're bombs sitting there. What's going to keep a spark from setting one off? He said, Brad, I would have to burn through the tank to set one off, and I'm not going to do that. I've been doing this a long time. I know what I'm doing. I suggested we gauge the tanks to see what the liquid level is. We have been told that several feet high. We're going to be welding 12 to 15 inches off the ground. Where that liquid level is going to determine whether or not we do the welding. Because if there's not liquid to pull the heat away from that metal, you're going to burn through the tank. You're going to be running the welder too hot. So I suggested let's gauge that, double check that liquid level. Tracy said we don't have time. We don't have time. You ever heard that at work? You ever said it? Because we know the procedures to follow. We know what it takes to get this job done. But after enough times, we figure out really all those steps aren't required. We can kind of sidestep around one or two of those procedures. Because some jobs, just to prepare to do the job, will take longer than doing the job. So we figured out how we can take a shortcut. How we can not follow all the procedures. How long would it have taken me to go to the truck, get out the tape, walk up the catwalk, open hatch, gauge tank? 3 minutes. Maybe 3 minutes. We don't have time. Argued with him for just a few seconds. Over the years, I've seen a lot of people argue with Tracy. I never once saw him change his mind about anything. So I decided, why hit my head against a brick wall? And I gave in. That was my choice. I didn't think it was right or safe what we were doing, and I told Tracy, but I didn't stop him. Fine, go ahead and get this job done, and we'll move on to the next job. There's not going to be any grinding or brushing for me to do as a helper, so I didn't even put my gloves on, left them in the truck. Rolled the leads out for Tracy, I fired up the machine, he laid down on the ground, started welding on the first tank. Another supervisor drove by, saw us over there welding, knew we shouldn't be in there welding on those tanks. So he pulled in to put a stop to it, got out of his truck, found out it was Tracy doing the welding. You don't mess with Tracy, so he didn't stop him. Him and I visited for less than 30 seconds. Tracy was welding on that second tank. The supervisor went to get his pickup to leave. I started walking back towards Tracy, who's now welding on the second tank, and I reached a point where I was just about 6 feet away from him, and I heard a sound in that tank that he's welding on, and I knew it was going to explode. And I hollered at Tracy, it's going to blow. And just then it blew. The explosion came out of the tank right where he was welding. I was caught directly in the updraft of that explosion. The fireball hit me and launched me up in the air. I have no idea how high I went. When I finally started falling, I came down through the ball of fire again as it was still going up, and I landed on top of the other tank. And when I landed there, I couldn't believe what had just happened. I couldn't believe that I had just been involved in an explosion at work. Who did those things happen to? Somebody else. It'll always be someone else. That's how we justify thinking that it's okay to take a shortcut, because it won't be me. I laid there on top of that tank burning. My clothes were on fire. I was engulfed in flames, heat, and pain like I could have never imagined in my life. I started getting mad. I thought I was going to die that day. Wasn't scared to die. I've been a Christian for a lot of years. Me dying's not going to be a problem. But I had 3 young daughters at home, 7th grade, 5th grade, and 4th grade. And I wasn't going to get to finish raising them.